The concept of fairness in government policy is a fragile one, often claimed but seldom truly realized. We hear politicians speak of equality, but do their policies reflect this lofty ideal? The recent announcement regarding an increase in state pension payments for certain seniors, particularly those born between 1940 and 1955, should not be celebrated as maid generosity. It is, in fact, a long overdue correction, a patch on the tattered promises of fairness made by a system that has systematically shortchanged its citizens for decades. The irony here is undeniable. The government, once blind to the historical injustices in its pension calculations, is now finally acknowledging its failures, and only after prolonged public pressure. But make no mistake, this is not the time for thank you speeches. It is time for real change, for policies that no longer leave our seniors, especially women, fighting for a life of dignity in their later years. For years, generations of pensioners have suffered because of the fundamentally flawed calculations that neglected women who took career breaks to care for children or elderly relatives. These were not personal choices as often painted by policymakers, but societal norms imposed on women for generations. For those affected, the government is now offering an additional £916 a year. This sum, although modest, represents a desperately needed lifeline, particularly as the cost of living crisis continues to erode the quality of life for the elderly. But why should this be considered an act of charity when it is merely an acknowledgement of years of systemic oversight? Many of those now in their 70s and 80s, particularly women, have borne the brunt of these pension miscalculations. When the state pension system was first designed, women were often expected to rely on their husband's income and pensions. Those who were encouraged to pay a reduced rate of national insurance in the belief it would still provide them a fair pension are now being told that their faith was misplaced. The new initiative seeks to right these wrongs, but it does not go far enough. It should have been implemented decades ago, and the sheer fact that it took public pressure to get here speaks volumes about the incompetence and indifference that has plagued our government for years. The process of claiming this increase should be as straightforward as possible, yet it is still complicated and burdensome for many. With eligibility criteria tied to specific historical circumstances, such as working in industries that were restructured in the 70s and 80s, or taking time off for caregiving, many will still struggle to prove their entitlement. The government is stepping up to contact eligible individuals, but the onus remains on the pensioners themselves to take the necessary steps to claim the extra money. This should not be the case. If the government is aware of who qualifies, it should take the proactive step of ensuring that everyone receives what they are owed without forcing them to navigate a bureaucratic maze. Furthermore, we cannot overlook the fact that this payment is only part of a broader conversation about pension reform. This £916 increase is just the start. It should be a call to arms for the government to overhaul the entire pension system and make it fit for the modern world. The way we treat our elderly, particularly women, who have long been left behind, is a reflection of our society's values. The idea that someone who worked hard their entire life should struggle to pay for essential bills in their old age is an abhorrent injustice that should enrage us all. Yet, as we stand here today, many will continue to fall through the cracks. Some will miss out on this payment entirely due to the complex application process, while others will find that their eligibility is still deemed insufficient. To compound this increase does not automatically guarantee that people will be able to maintain a decent standard of living. £916 may cover some costs, but it won't cover them all, especially when inflation continues to eat away at the purchasing power of the pound. The cost of essentials, food, energy, healthcare, is rising faster than the pension adjustments can keep up. In this climate, £916 is a band-aid, not a solution. What is truly infuriating is the fact that we are once again addressing only the surface-level symptoms of a broken system, rather than the root causes of economic inequality. The UK's pension system remains outdated, complex, and unjust. The changes to pensions in the 1970s and 1980s were an open invitation for inequality, and yet it has taken decades for anyone to notice the injustice, let alone rectify it. This government might want to frame this as a win, but it is clear to anyone who has been paying attention that this is a modest, belated response to a crisis long in the making. What needs to happen now is a systemic overhaul, not merely a piecemeal solution. Every person who has contributed to society through work, especially those who raised families or faced systemic barriers, should have a pension that reflects their contributions. The government's current strategy might help in the short term, but it is ultimately insufficient. It is an embarrassment that a May £916 is hailed as a significant increase, when the real issue is the deeply flawed, inequitable structure that allowed pensioners to fall through the cracks in the first place. It is time for us to demand better. This increase is not the end of the road. It is a reminder of the failures of the past and a clarion call for the future. The government owes it to every senior citizen, every person who has worked and contributed to this society, to overhaul a pension system that continues to leave too many behind. Until that happens, nothing will change.